the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour with your hosts, Joe Bond and AJ Applegarth.
Touchdown! All right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, as usual, Mr. Elf AJ Applegarth. What's up, man?
What's happening?
I like that hat. I like that hat. Had to one-up me there, huh?
I did. I was going to put this one on, but the Eagles kind of suck right now, so I'm repping the other Phillies squad here with the Sixers.
I'm happy that the Eagles suck, but it kind of means that the Cowboys then might win the division, and I don't know if that's any better.
No, it's not. Stop. Okay.
Get your you-know-what together, guys. Yeah. All right. So apologize for missing last week. I came down with the vid. Unfortunately, AJ had a whole bunch of things going on. Just wasn't really happening last week. But we are back in action for your semifinal performances here. So good to go. That being said, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave those comments, chime in during the show, the live show here. We will answer questions. We'll talk with you guys. It's fun. We appreciate it. And then, if you're looking for lineup advice, custom lineup advice for, the last couple of rounds here, your playoffs, go ahead and jump over to fantasysixpack.net/plans, become an all access member. And you're going to get access to our award-winning rankings. You're going to get access to the projections and then all the DFS and betting content that we have. And then best of all, you get to talk to us directly on our Discord. And if you play fantasy baseball, fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey, we got all that stuff too. And so, you get to talk to all of us there. I'll tell you what, the DFS guys on the Discord, they are just, man, they're printing money right now. It is a good time. So jump on over there and jump in there. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest of the week. You ready, AJ?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Mr. Nick Script from Fantrax, what is up, man? Thanks for joining us tonight.
What's up, guys? What's up? I didn't get the memo about the Christmas hats. I feel kind of left out, but I'm excited to come on your guys' show here and talk some football. I don't do a ton of guest spots, and this is the second stream of the day, and I feel like I'm ready to talk some more here. We got a game on right now, and we have a very, very interesting slate ahead of us in the semifinals of the playoffs. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, interesting slate along with a crap load of injuries that have just piled up over the last half of the season. It feels like it's just been massive accumulation here of injuries and very making for some very interesting calls here for people's lineups. But before we jump through our typical start sit questions that we will get into, we're going to start off here with some news talk, and we'll start off here with the Colts, and just want to get your opinion on Michael Pittman sounds like he's going to be ready to go. It actually sounds like Jonathan Taylor is going to be back as well. They've both practiced today. I'm for one utterly shocked that Michael Pittman is even thinking about playing in this game. I mean, after that shot he took, I thought there was no way he was going to play, but these guys somehow can figure out how to, shake off a concussion in 3 days. I have no idea how that's possible. I've known friends that have gotten concussions, man. They last like months sometimes. It's just nonsense how this stuff works. So anyway, he's passing concussion protocol, and he's gonna be back on the field. So are you comfortable playing? You just sliding Pittman right back in where you normally would with him. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor, or are you a little hesitant with these guys in week 16 here?
I think with Pittman, he's just been a target hog this season. He's averaging 10.2 targets per game. Very, very productive. I think it's a good boost, kind of slept on boost to Gardner Minshew, who's coming off of a great week. Mm-hmm. If he's getting two of his solidified playmakers in his system, I think that gives him a bump, and Taylor, I think, we've seen the history of what he's done for, the fantasy landscape, and it's been a rough ride this season just with injuries. But if you're looking at the last game he played, put 91 yards on the board. He's had 20 plus fantasy point weeks this season. I think both of these guys should be in your lineups at the end of the day. I think it's hard this time of year if you have Jonathan Taylor to not play Jonathan Taylor. Everybody's scraping for running backs to play, it feels like. So I think both guys have to be in your lineup.
Yeah. I agree. I readjusted my rankings around 7:30 tonight and put them both up pretty high in their positions. So they are easily startable players for me. AJ, I'll start here with you on this next one. Obviously, Keenan Allen ruled out is kind of not a shocking news here. I guess really not much to say about Keenan Allen, but what do you think about the rest of these Chargers? Eckler's been on the downswing. Obviously, they're going to have Easton Stick there. Josh Palmer was really the only guy last week who just sort of had like a massive second half there and was able to make a little something out of nothing there. Are you comfortable starting any of the Chargers this week against the Kansas City Chiefs?
Buffalo, but no.
Are they Buffalo? Why was I thinking
it's Buffalo?
That's Vegas? Sorry, I knew.
Yeah.
Teams that played last week with their opponents.
Yeah.
Anyway, Buffalo, not much better.
Not really. I mean, Buffalo has been on a pretty massive tear since they got rid of Ken Dorsey, and they've really clawed their way back into this playoff picture. They absolutely dismantled Dallas last week, which I loved. But then Philly again choked on Monday night, so it was all for naught. But I think just looking at what Las Vegas did to this Chargers team last Thursday, I'm not feeling good about any of them. I mean, Palmer, maybe. It seemed like he started to get some chemistry in that second half, like you said. Ekeler has he's been really off this year. Definitely not returning first round value to his owners, and that's hard to see. And I just think if they're going to end up getting behind again in this game, they're just going to have to abandon the run again. And Eckler's just possibly another single digit performance, which is not good for your playoff teams.
It's crazy to think that getting passing the ball more, it means you're going to get off of Ekeler and just like not utilize him. It's so crazy because that's been his thing. He's been a target monster as a running back. And so I don't know, Nick, like what's your take on Ekeler here? I mean, like I'll be honest, I'm super nervous with him, and I've got him in Raz Bowl, and I'm in the run-in to make the finals here, Raz Bowl. Right now, I don't have Ekeler in my lineup.
I don't blame you. And the thing is, Austin Ekeler, I think, is tagged as a dual threat running back. He's not. He is a pass catching running back. If you look at his rushing numbers historically, he does not put up good yardage on the ground. So you are really dependent on the pass catching numbers. And then you look at the last couple of weeks, 4 catches, week 13, 2 catches, week 11, 2 catches. That is what his upside is the pass catching. And if you take that away from him, there's nothing to Austin Ekeler. He's not going to rush for 100 yards at the end of the day. So if he's not catching 5-6 passes and maybe scoring, he's not delivering this season. And that's just the simplicity of that. We've known historically Austin Ekeler almost gets wide receiver numbers, to that category. And right now, if you're going to juggle, maybe it's 5 catches, maybe it's 2. I don't know how he can be in lineups right now. Again, it depends on what you have in your roster, obviously, but still, it's a sketchy play.
Yeah, it's really hard to take a lot from last week's game. I don't want to super overreact to it. I know before week 14, Staley came out and said that, they're going to, get a better look at some of these other running backs. Like the running back room is going to change. Well, then week 14 came. Austin Ekeler saw 72% of the snaps. Still ran the ball 53% of the time. Like his usage was almost identical, if not more than it had been the rest of the season. Last week came, they got obliterated. It was over early, and they just said, you know what? We're just going to see what Isaiah Spiller's got. So I don't know. The game's a little bit more competitive. Maybe they keep Ekeler in, but it just hasn't been great for quite some time, unfortunately. And we've actually got one of the start sit questions, so I'm not going to give it away, but I've got some guys that I would have never in a million years thought, week 1, 2 of the season. Oh yeah, I'll be starting this guy over Ekeler in a tournament style league for a chance to make the finals. It's not a comfortable feeling.
I'll just add to it before we get into the start sit. I mean, this is like the perfect topic because I'm very nervous about all of my guys. Like, just looking at my teams, guys that have been reliable and helping me all season long, they're questionable in some cases, or I don't really love the matchup. And you know how I love to like fiddle around with stashing defenses for playoffs. I'm like, well, should I just drop defenses at this point? Oh, I like this matchup if I get by next week. So it's just tough, man. It's all tough right now. It's like a higher stress level than I feel like I remember from last year.
We say that every year, but it is what it is. Yeah. Chad over here, I'm going crazy and put Pat Mahomes a bottom 5 QB this week.
Wow.
I know Pat Mahomes hasn't been Pat Mahomes, but that seems a bit extreme, but all right, we'll see. We will see. Next up here, so another quarterback though, as we're talking about quarterbacks here, Trevor Lawrence sounding like, so when I wrote the notes, it says still in concussion protocol. What do we do with the Jags player if he misses the game? As I'm at my son's Cub Scout meeting tonight, rumors came out that he is very, very unlikely to play this week. So I guess there you go. The question still sits. Nick, what do you do with the Jags player? Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones is probably out, but ETN hasn't, been, he started the season on fire, but usage is still there, but it's really not, what we were seeing early on from him. Evan Ingram's been pretty good, but without Trevor Lawrence, this is a big game for the Jags. What do we do with them? You're on mute, man.
Oh. My bad. Sorry. So I have one guy I trust, and you named him already. It's Evan Ingram, and there is some hesitation because again you're playing with the backup quarterback, but Buccaneers good matchup against tight ends. He's been insanely consistent when it comes to just his fantasy production, finishing top 12 for the position. Also, just the consistency of his target. So he's been very important to his offense. I think ETN in a tougher matchup. I'm not going to say you got to bench him necessarily because, again, it's dependent on who you have, but it's not a smash play for him. Calvin Ridley, I'm a big Calvin Ridley fan. It's not a smash play for him. And you got Zay Jones may or may not play. I think the only guy I would really trust is just Evan Ingram because he's been Mr. Reliable the entire season. Calvin Ridley's been up and down. Travis Etienne's been great, but again, tough matchup. I think the only guy that's been fairly consistent is Ingram.
Yeah, and especially lately since Kirk went out, Ingram last week kind of flopped, but I mean that was a super rough matchup for anybody on that team. But other than that, I mean, he's been putting up just monster numbers the last couple of weeks without Christian Kirk there, and finally getting in the end zone. That was the one thing kind of holding it back. Everybody's like, "Oh, Ingram's not doing that good." The dude's still seeing a massive target share, like 21% of the targets for that team, and it was just inevitable. He's going to start scoring touchdowns, and he's scoring them in the fantasy playoffs for people who are right before it. That's money time, man. That's when people are going to remember you and draft you next year and go, "Yeah, my boy."
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough, man. I didn't get to adjust the rankings yet for the Jags missing Trevor Lawrence. I ranked them as if Trevor Lawrence was playing. So things will move. So if you're looking at my rankings as of Thursday night, thankfully they didn't play the Thursday night game, and I didn't have to do it before that game started. But I will be moving all of the Jags players down a little bit here without Trevor Lawrence. There's no way that I'm going to be relying on CJ Beathard? No, thanks. I'm good. So,
all right, let's move into some QB sit start. See where we're at here.
Sit start. All right.
Start sit. Whatever.
It's cool.
It's the same thing. Tomato. Come on.
Yeah. It sounds a little pessimistic, but it's all right.
Exactly.
Anyway, Nick, I told you this for the show, but for those listening, what we do here is we run through quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, got a couple start sit questions to kind of give a little sneak preview of the rankings that we've got here, and just kind of where our heads at with the weekend games. And Mike, our producer, will be the voice in the sky presenting the questions to us, and then Nick, he'll kind of explain who starts and what order we go in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So since you're our special guest tonight, Nick, you get to go first. All right. And we get to start off with the QBs. This one's a fun one, in my opinion. This week, would you rather have Justin Fields against Arizona in your lineup or Brock Purdy versus the Ravens?
All right. So I will say up front here, there's been, a few guys every year that you start one way with your analysis of them and how you view them, and you completely change and pivot after, more information. That's Brock Purdy for me. I was very out on him. I didn't know if he was going to be the starter all year, and now I'm very impressed with what we've seen. But I'm going Justin Fields, and it's not because I'm a massive Bears fan. No Bears homerism here, but it's a great matchup against the Cardinals. They allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. It was a down week 15. If you watch that Bears game like us in Chicago did, it was a brutal game to watch. You had the Hail Mary that could have been a touchdown. Robert Tonyan should not play football anymore. Dropped a wide open big play. The week prior, Fields threw for 223, had a touchdown through the air and on the ground. I mean, we know last year the upside that he brings with his legs, leading the league in rushing. And I argued at the beginning of the season, before anything kicked off, with some big guys in the industry that, hey, they're going to throw the ball more. There's context clues that they're going to throw the ball more. And we saw 2 really big weeks through the air out of Justin Fields in week 4 and 5, where he threw those pairs of 4 touchdown games back-to-back weeks and had some good yardage. So to me, I'm very in on Justin Fields still, and I do believe he is going to stay in Chicago. Personally, that's another discussion for another time, but it's a great matchup against the Cardinals. Brock Purdy, it's a little bit tougher of a matchup against the Ravens. I know he has big-time playmakers in his system, but I love the connection of Justin Fields to DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, and just having that dual threat upside. I'm all in on Justin Fields this week. I think he's going to be, personally, I think he's going to be a top 5 play.
I like that. And then just so you know, we kind of go in like a clockwise motion. So Joe's going to go next after you.
Yep.
All right.
So
Joe.
I'm on Justin Fields as well. I actually have Brock Purdy inside the top 10. I do think he's going to have a very good day. But Fields is inside my top 5. So I completely agree with you, Nick. This matchup is just too good. And look, as good as Brock Purdy has been in San Francisco, and his incredible touchdown efficiency rate that we're going to be looking at next year, and everybody and their mother is going to be looking at that when they evaluate Brock Purdy and say, is this going to be replicable, repeatable? Like that's one of the big things we've only seen. I think the last quarterback to repeat a touchdown efficiency rate like him might have been Aaron Rodgers. In his back-to-back MVP years, man. It's been crazy. So I don't think anybody's ready to put Brock Purdy up there yet, but the system is good. He's making throws. You can't knock him for what's working, right? And so, but this is a tough matchup. And so when you're looking at these two, it is Fields.
Yeah, not much else to add. I'm going Fields on this. The only potential kicker to go with Purdy on this is that the Ravens, while they are, pretty solid, I believe they're ranked first against opposing quarterbacks. They have been giving up touchdowns. The past 5 weeks, they've given up at least 1 touchdown. I know that's not great, but 2 weeks ago against the Rams, they gave up 3, and back in week 11 against Cincy, they gave up 2. So, Purdy, I think he'd be a safe play, but I think the play here is definitely Fields. So that's what I'm jumping on as well.
All right, just so you know, that question was easy. This one's the harder one. I just wanted to warm you guys up, Joe. So
the one I get. Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course I'm going to give the freebie to Nick, not you. Yeah, it is. Man. All right. Yep. You get to choose between Kyler Murray in that same matchup against Chicago, or are you going Tua versus Dallas?
With the news that Tyreek Hill is back, I am going to go with Tua. Now, if something happens and Tyreek has a little bit of a setback here, I think you kind you pull back on Tua and slot in Kyler Murray. Kyler hasn't honestly looked that great, guys. Like, let's be real. It's he's had a couple instances where you're like, oh, all right, I see. Like maybe it'll happen, but I don't know. The last couple of weeks here, it's been kind of going in the wrong direction. So I'm kind of out on using Kyler if I can. Chicago's defense, although not fantastic, has been so much better since they acquired Montez Sweat. It's just amazing what one dude up front can really do to a defense and really help out a secondary. And so, that, and then if you really look at, Dallas here, I know everybody, they've got a great defense, right? But in reality, like the last half of the season here, unless they're playing Jeff Driscoll, right, or Davis Mills, they've been beatable on defense. So it's sorry, why was 2022 highlighted for some reason when I was looking up like opponents here?
Because you don't know.
It was weird. I mean, Geno Smith got to him. They shut down Jalen Hurts, right? Sam Howell had a decent game. Josh Allen wasn't like lights out, but I mean, they just ran the ball down their throats. This Dallas defense is starting to show a little bit of holes here. Maybe they're getting tired. I don't know, but I think Tua and like just the speed on that team can really match well with Dallas. And we're going to see some big plays from this Miami offense.
Yeah, I am kind of leaning towards Tua as well. I mean, you just mentioned it. You had Washington and Seattle put up over 300 yards on this defense. Not surprisingly, Seattle was the one that came away with 3 touchdowns. Washington was not. But, Philly was shut down. Allen didn't need to do anything because James Cook was just running all over this defense. So that's the only thing that worries me about Tua is whether, obviously whether Tyreek is fully healthy and does end up starting is one caveat, but the other is the running game. We do know that they like to run both Mostert and Achane, so we could see some of that, especially looking at that blueprint from last week with James Cook. It's another AFC East team, another road game for Dallas. They are starting to show some cracks. I think it's still a better matchup for Tua.
Yeah, I'm a massive Tua fan. I'm a big proponent of him. I was coming into the season. I've not liked the floor the last couple of weeks. He's been outside the top 20 quarterbacks in 3 out of 4 of his last games played. I think Tyreek Hill is a factor. Obviously missing last game. They got the job done against the Jets, 30-0, right? So it wasn't like he needed to do a ton. But when you're scoring like that across the last couple of weeks, again, I'm a big Tua fan, but it's a tougher. It is a tough matchup, and I do think that you can argue, hey, this is the Dolphins are averaging the most total yards per game this season. They're a good offense, and so is Dallas. So it's going to be 2 guys throwing haymakers. You can argue that, but I'm just a little concerned just in the fantasy playoffs with a guy again who's been outside the top 20 3 out of 4 of his last games. So that's kind of my hesitation. I think with Kyler, at least he's been down the last 2 games as well, but I think you can at least say, hey, he might have a little bit safer of a floor just because he's starting to run the ball a little bit better. He's coming off of 49 yards. He had 51 yards on the ground in week 11. So if he's having a bad day, maybe it could be savored by a rushing touchdown. He did open up his first 3 starts with a rushing touchdown. So we know he has that in the bag. So I feel like that just kind of makes me feel a little bit easier than Tua this week.
Yeah, I will say, like, schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Chicago's 3rd best. So there's something to that. Dallas is down at like middle of the pack, 14th. So it's not as favorable of a matchup for Kyler Murray. So when you put that and then you put what weapons each guy has, that's why I'm leaning Tua.
Either way, I love it because there was no sweep this time. All right,
That's
AJ. Exactly. AJ, you get to start us off with the running backs. And I think this one's a spicy one, but I'll let you guys decide. AJ, you start Bijan Robinson versus the Colts this week, or Isaiah Pacheco versus the Raiders?
I mean, I don't like either of them. If this is the choice I have to make, I don't know. I mean, Arthur Smith just hates Bijan Robinson for whatever reason, and looking at Las Vegas, I mean, they've been pretty susceptible to the run most of the season. Again, last week they only gave up 81 yards to a terrible Chargers team that wasn't really running much because they were down so much. Gave up 111 the week prior to Minnesota, but still no touchdowns. Vegas's defense is, I don't know, they're just sneaky weird to me, because they can be very good on some days, and then
That's a great term.
Be horrific.
Sneaky
on
weird.
others. It is. I mean, but,
they're horrible, but they're like all of a sudden they'll just have the games where
they
you're
just
like,
holy
like,
hell, randomly have this game, and it's like, okay, maybe they are good. But yeah, I have a hard time trusting Pacheco. He was out last week. He's not on an injury report right now, so that bodes well for him. He's coming off of a 110-yard performance with a touchdown against Green Bay back in week 13. So it's hard to ignore that. And really, the Chiefs, you can't trust the receivers. We've already seen that in multiple games. Tony's going to line up offsides every week on every play that he's actually in. So I'm kind of
I'm gonna have to interrupt you. Don't you slander Rashee Rice like that.
I'm not. He has been good. I will give you that. He's been good recently. So, but how long did it take for them to figure it out? So I'm leaning Bijan on this, as much as I hate it. Because I just don't like picking either one of these guys. I just think somehow, some way, Arthur Smith is gonna try to actually use his running back, because Indianapolis is not good at all against the rush. That is one of their weak spots. So,
Nick, what you got, man?
I'm gonna lean Bijan as well, and I know there's a lot of risk after last week. It was very confusing for him to trail Algier in touches, especially seeing the 2 games prior he played 75% and 78% of the snaps, and he was operating to a degree as a workhorse, and then this happens. It reminds us of the game that he was like sick or whatever, and he was benched. But like you said, the Colts, such a good matchup, 4th most fantasy points per game to running back, 7th most rushing yards per game allowed. Vegas is a decent one too, but the Colts are a better one in my opinion. And I think at the end of the day, if you are in the semifinals of your fantasy football playoffs and you're shooting for the championship run, I think you're playing Bijan. I think you'd hate to just bench Bijan and then he goes out and scores 20 fantasy points and Pacheco scores, I don't know, 12 to 15 or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean too.
Bijan 18 plus fantasy points in 5 games this season. He's rushed for over 90 yards in 4 games, finished 6 weeks with 4 more receptions. So we've seen just so many good things out of him. And I'm not getting crazy here. And I don't want this to be some sort of hot take or anything, but Pacheco is coming off of an injury. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire did have a very good week. Now, do I think CEH is taking over the backfield? No, I don't. But do I think that maybe he earns some more touches? Maybe they say, hey, we're trying to win a Super Bowl. We don't want Pacheco to go out there and have 20 touches. Let's get him into, ease him back in a little bit. He'll still be the lead guy, but let's give CEH, some looks in the passing game, because he did well last game, 64 yards and a receiving touchdown. So I know you can say the same thing about Tyler Algier at the end of the day, but I think I'm just shooting for upside in the semis.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I was thinking the same thing. Like, they don't need to just pound the ball with Pacheco. And like Dion's saying here in the comments, I'm going with Pacheco. He's a mad runner. Yeah, he's a very angry, violent runner. But maybe that's not what they need him to do right now. Stay healthy. The playoffs are right around the corner. Just get there, right? And so Bijan, you're talking like the last couple of weeks where Bijan had 75-77% of the snaps. You look him all the way back to week 8. This was right after that week 7 weird game, right? 73% snap, then 61, then 77, then 63, but then 75. So the total sample, even with last week, is at 68.9% for that sample size. That's a massive snap share. The rushing attempts are a little lower than you would like, but like he runs 67% of the routes in that span of time. He gets 17% of the team's targets. Like this guy just sees the ball. He just has these weird games where it's all of a sudden like, what happened to Bijan? Like, where'd he go?
Yeah. Sneaky weird.
And then he comes back and he'll bust off like a fantastic game. So this feels like it could be one of those in a very nice matchup.
All right, and Nick, you get the honor of getting that special question Joe was referring to earlier. You want Austin Ekeler this week against the Bills or Chubba Hubbard against the Packers?
I originally was not a big Hubbard fan, just in all honesty, but he's playing as a workhorse right now. It's a very nice matchup against the Packers. They allowed the third most rushing yards per game this season. They're a top 10 matchup in points per game allowed to running back. So looking at Hubbard, he's operating as a workhorse, 78% and 73% of the snaps the last 2 weeks. Across the last 3 weeks, he ranks third in total rushing yards, 104, 87, and 87 yards on the ground in those 3 games. So, I said it earlier, Ekeler does not run the ball for good yardage, and now he's like fluctuating, and okay, sometimes he catches a decent amount of passes, sometimes he doesn't. So at the end of the day, I think I'm just going to bank on touches, and I'm going to bank on a really nice matchup, and it sounds gross, but I'm going to go with Hubbard.
Yeah, this was the one. So I'm literally like,
it's weird.
And actually, let me tack on an extra one for you. Throw in Aaron Jones in the mix. Big one. I mean, I'm looking at Hubbard, Jones, and Ekeler just going gross. Yeah, it's not great. Right now I've actually got Aaron Jones in there, but I've actually got Chubba Hubbard ranked just slightly ahead of Aaron Jones, but Eckler's below both of them. So it's it's just more of it's really hard to trust this Chargers offense. With them, it kind of seems like this whole team is just they're done for the season. It's what it feels like after just getting absolutely shelled by the Raiders last week.
Yeah, I'm on board with Hubbard as well. I mean, Green Bay's given up 4 straight 100-yard games, or 100 yards to opposing rushing attacks, and 5 out of the last 6. They've got 6 touchdowns in that span given up. I mean, everything just kind of bodes well. I mean, I know Carolina is the bottom of the barrel for teams right now, but Green Bay is not as good as you would really think, I feel like, and I know that they can be run on. So I'm leaning Hubbard here. Ekeler's just been disappointing. So
all right, Nick. I'm a Packers fan. Knowing you're a Bears fan, you know it's true. Death, taxes, and the Packers can't stop the damn run.
Man, I can say death taxes and a lot of things about the Bears too. So I'm glad we can just point out things that are not great about our teams.
I will sit there all day with you and do that.
Oh, man. Sounds like we all need some lawyers, guns, and money.
Yeah.
We're going to move on down to the wide receivers here. Joe, you get to start us off. And Nick, just so you know, in this one, you get to pick 2 and sit 1. Joe, you got Rashee Rice versus the Raiders, Brandon Aiyuk versus the Ravens, or a struggling Stefon Diggs versus the Lions. Who you sitting? Who you starting?
All right, so it's Aiyuk. You said
Diggs and
Rice and Diggs.
Rice and Diggs.
Oh, this is a nice one, man. It's super close between Rice and Aiyuk. I'm gonna sit Aiyuk in the tough matchup here. I know Diggs hasn't been the Diggs we're all used to. But this you have Diggs versus Detroit. That doesn't look right.
It's not.
It's Chargers.
Diggs versus
It's the Chargers. I just feel like Diggs is going to be able to to get something done here against,
Got
LA.
taxes and I fuck up a banner.
Yes, no kidding.
it's
Rashee
on the
Rice
fantasy.
is basically the only other guy that Mahomes is throwing to besides Kelsey, and so you gotta love the volume. Aiyuk's a big play guy, and to where he's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but this is a tough matchup, and so it's going to be a little bit tougher to rely on kind of that big play ability from Aiyuk going against the Ravens defense. AJ,
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Actually, I like Diggs. I think him and Allen are going to get back on track this week. Again, we saw what Vegas's offense did with Aiden O'Connell and Devonta Adams. I mean, hell, Jacoby Myers threw a touchdown. So there's all kinds of openings here for Diggs to get random fantasy points on top of his standard points that he usually gets. So I'm definitely starting Diggs. And Rice, like we said, he's been very solid recently. He's been the most trusted receiver, outside of Kelsey, really, that Mahomes has. Still only one game over 100 yards, but the receptions and the targets are there. 9 for 9 last week, 7 for 10 the week before that, 8 for 9 the week before that, 8 for 10 the week before that. So, and 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. So I definitely feel like he can find the end zone again this week. This game could randomly turn into a shootout. His 100-yard game that he had was actually against Las Vegas. So I'm definitely starting him, and it's tough to sit Aiyuk, but I may actually be sitting him in favor of Amari Cooper this week. So there's that.
I think out of the group, you look at Rashee Rice, and he's just been on absolute fire. Only 4 wide receivers have been targeted more than Rashee Rice across the last 4 weeks of football, and that's Patrick Mahomes targets, right? So that usually translates to good things for fantasy football. I think Diggs is going to have a bounce back week. I think he's been very frustrated. I tweeted out something along the lines of where he's been finishing for the wide receiver position, and of course, it was like a list of where he finished, wide receiver 54, wide receiver 54. I went down the list, and that got like 900 likes. But if I go in, write an article or put out a video, it could get like 10 likes. That's just how Twitter works. But I do think it's going to be the bounce back game for him. I think he's been frustrated, and I know that Josh Allen only passed the ball 15 times last game, and you can say, well, he game managed against the Cowboys. What if they do that against the Chargers? Well, you got Easton Stick in the Chargers. So we want to get Stefon Diggs right. The Chargers allow the 3rd most passing yards per game. It's just such a nice matchup. I think Stefon Diggs bounces back. And I love Brandon Aiyuk as much as the next guy, but I think that with so many playmakers, sometimes you just turn into the odd guy out. Last week, 5 targets, week 12, 4 targets, week 10, 3 targets. So can he finish with over 100 receiving yards, Brandon Aiyuk? Absolutely. Can he earn, 3 or 4 targets only and be outside the top 30? Maybe as well. And I know Diggs has been bad, like we just said, but I think, Rashee Rice has been on fire. Stefon Diggs has the perfect matchup, and I think Aiyuk is just the odd guy out for me.
All right. Next one here. AJ, you want T. Higgins with Jamar Chase out against the Steelers? Hopkins against the Seahawks? Or the rookie Jordan Addison against the Lions?
This Minnesota Lions game actually has a lot of weight to it. So I feel like Addison could be a solid play. Hopkins has been solid. Obviously, we know Seattle can be thrown on. We didn't really see it as much as I had hoped last week, or earlier this week, I guess I should say. T. Higgins is very interesting. This game in Pittsburgh, Browning's been very good for Cincy, and he's still getting the ball to these receivers. Pittsburgh just got torched by Indianapolis receivers last week. The only thing that would keep me from going with Higgins here is that while Pittsburgh can get torched, they don't really give up end zone, touchdowns to opposing wide receivers. They gave up 6 in the first 3 games early in the year, but then since then they've only given up 4. So they've really tightened up in the red zone, at least against receivers. I think if Higgins is going to find the end zone, he's going to have to do it on a deeper play. So I think I'm going to go with Addison and Hopkins here, actually.
I think for me, I like what you said about the Minnesota-Detroit game. I think it's going to be a fun one. I think we're going to see a lot of action from everybody involved. I think that's one of the games that if you have one of the pieces in one of those two offenses, you probably want to play them. I think both teams are pretty friendly defensively. I think both teams got good playmakers. So I think I'm going to play Addison. I see the appeal for DeAndre Hopkins because he's the one, right? He's the one in his offense, and there's really not a 2 through the air. We're seeing Treylon kind of like start playing, and Nick Westbrook-Kinney, does some stuff sometimes. But Higgins has had a big asterisk of a year, and a lot of that came through that rib injury or the rib injuries, whatever it was, that set him back a bit. But when he's earned targets, you look at week 2, 12 targets, 28.9 fantasy points. Week 9, 9 targets, 19 fantasy points. And then just this past week, 8 targets and 22.1 fantasy points. So the weeks that he earns good targets, he does productive things. And I think without Jamar Chase, I kind of am going to lean with T. Higgins here. I think we just fluctuate with Hopkins at the end of the day. I know he's very important in his offense, and I know that he could put up good numbers, but you look at the last 2 weeks, it just tells the story of the tape. 4.1 fantasy points in week 15, but 25.4 in week 14. So it kind of just like goes up and down. And none of those games that he has bad weeks is he under targeted. So he's getting targets, but it comes down to quarterback play. And like you said too, Jake Browning's looking pretty decent, so I'm going to go Higgins and Addison.
Yeah, it's definitely Higgins for me. As far as my automatic start here, I think you guys have said everything to kind of back that one up. For me, it's kind of I've actually got Hopkins ranked pretty high, but I am worried. We still don't know if Will Levis is playing this week, right? And not that that's been awesome, every week, but if he's out, I mean, what are we looking at? We getting Tannehill back? Anybody want that? No. I know it's a pretty nice matchup here. Seattle can be beat, in the air, so that is a favorable matchup. But I have my doubts with playing Hopkins over both of these two. Addison, here's my thought: Higgins and Hopkins are probably the safer guys. I think Addison, if you need more of a home run guy, I would go Addison over Hopkins.
All right.
That's
all
fair.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I will say the last note here, I mentioned the touchdown scarcity against Pittsburgh recently, against Seattle, aside from, again, last week, thanks Philly, taking away that, they had given up at least 1 and really 2 touchdowns since week 7. So lots of games giving up lots of touchdowns there. They've only had 4 total games where they haven't given up a touchdown. And again, that includes last week and Philly. I hate you. So it's close, but I mean, I can see the argument for both sides really, but I think I'm just going to lean Hopkins. So.
All right. On to the
Go for
next
it.
one then. All right, Nick, you want to start Zay Flowers against the Niners, Terry McLaurin against the Jets, or Diontae Johnson against the Bengals?
So if I'm starting 2 of these guys, I think the oddball out without even digging into the other 2, I think is Terry McLaurin. It's a bad matchup through the air against the Jets. he's a guy, he's coming off of a very nice week, and it makes you think sometimes like, hey, this is what we expected out of Terry McLaurin. But if you look at the previous 1, 2, 3, 4 games, he's been under 10 fantasy points. And I think he's had a very, very underwhelming season, which is kind of confusing because a lot of us look at Sam Howell and some, I know he, hasn't been, maybe the world beating fantasy quarterback. He's been fairly consistent, but you look at Sam Howell and you say, hey, he's actually put up good numbers. Why is Terry McLaurin like not for fantasy? He's had some good weeks, but if you look at the full picture here, Terry McLaurin's had a lot of just really bad weeks, and that's strange because I was a big Jahan Dotson guy coming into the season. He hasn't been very useful. So it's strange. It's like, it's like how is Sam Howell like putting up these numbers? Like, where is it going? In a bad matchup against the Jets, I just don't like Terry this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's sit McLaurin. My rankings right now say Johnson, but again, it is Thursday. Things are gonna move, and my gut's telling me just sit McLaurin here. This is the nasty matchup here, and you're gonna look at last week too. You brought that up, Nick. Where if you look at the box score, you're going, oh, there's Terry McLaurin. 141 yards, a touchdown. Yeah, he's back. 3 of those catches for 93 yards and a touchdown were with backup quarterback Jacoby Brissett. Guess who is not starting the football game this week? Jacoby Brissett. So unless they bench Howell midway through the game, I don't see it happening. And it's very possible they will, but in my opinion, I don't really see what that does for the Commanders' future. Jacoby Brissett's not your guy. You've got to see if Howell can work through these, struggles and against a really good defense. I think benching him again would be a disaster for this franchise. So I don't think they're going to do it. So they're going to, even if they're just getting wrecked and he just looks miserable, I don't think you're going to get Jacoby Brissett just slinging the ball downfield like we got last week.
No. I mean, they were protecting Sam Howell for that. That's why Brissett was in there. I mean, okay. Rivera needs to worry about protecting his job, I guess. So maybe that's
dealing today, by the way.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Holy cow, dude.
Very angry that I selected anybody but him for my DraftKings lineups tonight. Or at least as the whatever it's called, captain. So anyway, Flowers is questionable, but Harbaugh's saying he's going to play. The game again is Monday night, so he's got a little more leeway. McLaurin has just been such a downer this year.
I mean, Angela here in the comments saying Samuel over McLaurin. You're not totally wrong. I wouldn't do it. Like I can't actually pull that trigger. Hopefully you've got if you don't want to play McLaurin, hopefully you've got somebody a little more reliable than Curtis Samuel. But I totally get it. Excuse me.
Yeah, but between the two, which one's been more reliable?
Right. But Curtis Samuel also,
Angelo, you nailed it. Like
just like a gadget player too, it feels like, and it's just sort of like, man.
I mean, before last week, though, he hadn't scored since week 8 against Philly. He hasn't topped 100 yards at all. He's only scored one other time against Denver back in week 2. I mean, this is not the Terry McLaurin that people drafted.
No.
It's a shame because he is a very talented receiver.
He's very good.
And Nick, you mentioned it too, the Dotson thing. Again, I have him in a league or two and was really hyped about it. Like, okay, McLaurin's going to get all the attention from the defenses. So Dotson's going to, reel in the catches. He's been absolute garbage. So it's been tough sledding owning any Commanders receivers. So yeah, I think out of these 3, I'm also sitting McLaurin.
All right, Joe, you get to finish it off with our fun tight end question. You're lucky. The Saints play tonight. Taysom Hill couldn't be in the question. You get Isaiah Likely against the Niners or Cole Kmet against the Cardinals. Who you got?
Did you look at my rankings before you asked this question?
Nope,
I've got them
ECR.
back to back. Now I use my half PPR rankings. I've got Isaiah Likely ahead. Now, Kmet did pop up on the injury report today, so that's not a good sign. So that could make my decision really easy for me. But let's just say, for the sake of the question, that both are healthy and going into the game. I'm still gonna play Likely. He's been really good lately. Seeing a very high target share. Now I know it's the Ravens, and target share, it can be skewed when you think about that, but he's been seeing 14, 18, 29% target share in this offense. That's elite level tight end stuff there. And we saw the big play last week where I believe it was last week, right, when he caught the touchdown.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing Isaiah Likely, coming to his own here. And I was a little skeptical when he first got the starting job over Andrews after the injury. I was a little careful. I know everybody was just like, oh, it's his turn. He had a couple dead, pretty dud weeks there first, early on. And I kind of was like, oh, all right. But these last 3 weeks have been really, really good. So I kind of see that continuing. And if this offense is going to move the ball through the air, it's going to be, weirdly enough, through him and OBJ now, maybe not so much Zay Flowers as much as we all want it to be.
Yeah, for me, this one's tough. I'm looking at Kmet. The receptions are there, the targets are definitely there. I mean, he's seen less than 6 targets once since week 8. And then before that, take out week 7, because that was just, I don't think he played that week. I don't know, but it's just zeros across the board. So he only saw more, 6 or more targets 3 times in 6 weeks. So, 50% of the time, but he's definitely becoming more trusted. He is a go-to target. Obviously, the end zone is what saved him last week, because he only had 23 yards on those 5 receptions, which is pretty terrible. So the end zone appearance was definitely beneficial. But I think I am going to go Likely here. I think, Joe, as you said, he's really coming into his own. It's a better matchup on paper. San Fran is not as solid against the tight end as Arizona's has been.
Which is strange to say.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wait, Arizona's good at something.
The tight end fantasy points per against defenses, by the way, is so skewed to which tight ends you've actually faced. Let's be real. And I know you can say that with any position, but it is more so, in my opinion, with tight ends, because you could face some you could face teams who just literally don't use the tight end like that, or don't have one to utilize, and you're going to be awesome against a tight end. Or you could face a bunch of George Kittles and Travis Kelce's, and then you're going to get smoked most likely against a tight end.
Yeah, I mean the Niners have given up back-to-back weeks of touchdowns to opposing tight ends, and then before that they didn't give up anything since week 1. So I'm thinking that trend continues with Likely. I think this is a game that Baltimore really needs to win. So, Nick, what do you think?
I think I'm going to go with Likely as well. I do want to say with Cole Kmet, I feel like the things that we look for in a tight end, he's been doing a lot this season. He like you pointed out, the consistency in his targets is there. He's actually had some good yardage days. He's had 2 weeks scoring 2 touchdowns in those games. So whatever you're looking for in a tight end, I think he's shown us this year. I think the injury, popping up, that's obviously an asterisk, but I think in fantasy football, sometimes you just kind of, you ride the hot hand. And right now it's Likely, back-to-back weeks with very good yardage, back-to-back weeks scoring a touchdown, back-to-back weeks over 18 or with 18 plus fantasy points. So I think, just to put it plain and simple here, you guys made some, solid points, but I think likely's to play. I think when you're looking at trends and guys trending up, that's him. Can Cole Kmet, if he's healthy, go out and ball out as well? Yeah, but I think I just have an issue if I roster Isaiah Likely. He's been doing very good things for me 2 weeks in a row now. Now I'm going to be like, but maybe he cools off this week, so I'm going to bench him. So I think that's kind of just like the strategy behind it,
I agree. All right, Nick. Well, I think that is it for the show. Want to thank you for coming on and, enjoy your night here as you go. But before you go, let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on the rest of this season. And then obviously into the off season as we're here in week 16.
For sure. So I'm on a couple different social medias, but you can follow me on Twitter or X at P2W Fantasy. Nick Scribb, I'm the NFL content lead for the brand Fantrax. For them, I do a variety of content. I do content in all different forms. So I do live streams, short videos, articles, write-ups, data drops, graphics for Fantrax to just try to be diverse in the way that I deliver content. So I stay pretty active, both redraft and dynasty. And I just really appreciate you guys having me on the show here tonight. It was a very, very smooth ride. You guys have a great show here and really enjoyed it. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Much
and
appreciated.
people in the comments are loving it too. So thank you for coming on again. And have a good night, man. Enjoy the rest of this game.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Happy holidays.
All right, AJ. So I know we didn't really get into this before too much, but do you want to? I know we meant to do like defenses that you want to stream or stash. Obviously a little too late to stash them, but do you have anybody in mind that you're really looking at? This week's really interesting, in my opinion, for defenses. Like there are some guys at the top of my defensive rankings list that I'm like, oof. But they have such good matchups. Like last week, the Raiders were one of those teams where it was like, no. But I mean, I snatched them up in the crab cake league when I was in the playoffs, and then the next day I was not in the playoffs, and they went off and scored 29 points, and I was like, well, at least I was right.
No, anybody playing the Chargers obviously is a great matchup. So you're looking at again Buffalo this week, and then you're looking at Denver's defense next week. So also, if Denver happens to be out there randomly on your waiver wire and you can't get Buffalo, go ahead and get Denver now because they're going up against New England this week, and they're both of them are home games.
They are a very
Denver.
popular pickup this week, I guarantee you.
I actually went out in my ESPN league and I grabbed both of these defenses last week while I was watching the Chargers Vegas game, and I was like, add.
This is what you do.
So it is.
I even learned this trick from AJ. It was let's stash some defenses, and so weeks ago I was stashing like when I knew in some of these leagues I was in, I'm out there stashing the Bears and because they have somebody really nice.
Bears is another matchup. They've got Arizona this week,
which is hit or miss, and they got Atlanta next week, who now looks like they might be starting Heineke again. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah. So Atlanta,
the Packers are one this week to get Carolina.
Solid. The Texans was one that I was eyeing up before I realized that the Chargers were absolute garbage. The Texans were a defense that I liked.
And apparently Joe Flacco can play football again. So like the Cleveland Browns isn't necessarily the rollover we thought it was going to be.
It's not now, but
they get Tennessee next
again,
week.
this is something that I look at from week 8. If not earlier.
I'm not doing that. I'm not stashing defenses the week.
No, I'm not stashing that earlier. I'm just looking at matchups, solely looking at matchups early, because I'm like, well, and it depends on how my team's doing. If my team's, doing well enough and I feel like I'm guaranteed to make the playoffs or pretty close to it, I'm already looking at defenses because it's something that you can get huge points out of. Miami's defense last week was an awesome defense. They helped me, rack up points again in that ESPN league. Houston was one I looked at because they have Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee. And as you said, Cleveland is not the Cleveland that we're used to seeing. But the two matchups against Tennessee were favorable. They put up 13 points in that ESPN league. So, again, scoring may be a little different from standard there. But Houston was a solid one. The Colts have been another, very good defense of late, putting up a lot of points. They had a bit of a dud versus Cincy, but before that, they've been double-digit points for 4 weeks, from week 9 through last week, all double-digit points aside from that Cincy game. So
I know this defense isn't out there, but this is almost unfair. Whoever has Cleveland, if they get to the final week, is going to get them against the Jets.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty phenomenal.
Oh
But
my gosh.
here again, the Jets this week go up against Washington.
Right. Well, I
and-
mean, and everybody had the Jets too.
yeah, exactly.
I was able to randomly snatch them up in one league. I was like, all right.
I mean, somebody may have dropped them though in your league because
They
they
did.
sucked last week against Miami. So, before that, they had given up a few, or had 3 pretty solid games, then sucked against Buffalo. So, if you play the game right, you can definitely find these gems.
Yeah.
And
the Jags get Carolina next week,
yeah, that's a solid one as well. I mean, you really just have to look at what teams are really
These
bad.
Rams get the
and
Giants.
what teams are really good. And this game, I thought this game was going to be more of a shootout between the two. Clearly it is not. So
Nope.
but I did play the Rams kicker tonight, so I'm pretty happy about that. Although he did miss that one field goal. But he's had a pretty good game. So those are the main ones I was looking at was, Texans, Broncos, Buffalo, harder to come by.
Yeah.
But then
Agreed.
you got Texans, you got Colts, you got Bears out there. Yeah, all pretty solid looks.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we say it every year. Go out there and take a look. If you're in the playoffs still, go out there and look, you're probably holding on to some schmuck on the back end of your bench that you're never going to use in the playoffs. Drop him, pick up next week's defense now, so you're not having to fight everybody for them next week, right? Just do it now to save yourself the worry, and then you can go out and instead of having to worry about figuring out your defense next week, you can just go out and grab all the other waiver wire guys, if you need them, right? And so, believe me, I have literally won playoffs because my defense in the playoffs have just blown up, and I would have done it against you last week.
Yeah.
Had there not been a stat correction in
a dual
twice?
stat correction. Yeah.
Who knows what happened, man? That was so weird. I was out of the playoffs, I was in the playoffs, and then I was back out of the playoffs. And I was like, what?
Wait, we correct our correction. Sorry.
Yeah. I was like, wait, I should just be allowed to be in. Just there should be like a 3-way matchup there. Whoever scores the most goes on.
And to boot, that matchup that I have, now that I have made it through because I didn't have to play you, I have Buffalo's defense already, and had them all season. But I'm playing Denny Carter, and he's got Chicago's defense. So here again,
there you go.
He's got Taysom Hill in his 0.2 points. So loving that. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
We'll see. We'll see how
if you get to the finals this year, you're actually going to set your lineup against Scott if he gets there, or are you going to forget like you did 2 years ago?
Is that what happened?
Yes.
Is that what I did?
Yes. Because you're an idiot.
Is it shocking he forgot that?
Also, no.
No. Anyway. All right. Oh, we have a question here real quick before we jump off. Metcalf or Aiyuk full PPR? I'm going Aiyuk. Yeah. He's been good. I like Metcalf too. But it's Aiyuk for me here.
There was one more question that I'll take the blame for this one, Dion. He asked in the beginning of the show.
Oh, I did not see it. I apologize. Rashee, Rice, Mike Evans, Aiyuk need one, then Green Bay. Okay, so we'll do the receiver first. Rice, Evans, Aiyuk. It is.
Well, we would have to go
Mike
Rice.
Evans for me. Man, you can only start one. Holy cow. I have Aiyuk, Evans, and Rice all as top 12 receivers. How do you only need one of them? And then Green Bay or Denver defense is Denver. I mean,
Denver, easily.
that's the no-brainer one for me there.
Yeah.
I do like the Packers this week, but that Denver matchup is so good. All right.
I'm leaning
is it.
Rice. Yeah. Rice, Denver.
All right. Rice is number 2 on my list there, but Mike Evans, man, him and Baker got something special, man. I don't understand it, but it works. So,
all right.
Alrighty, that is it for the show. Good luck to everybody in week 16 here. Hope you make it to next week so we can help you win your fantasy championships. And again, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, jump over to our Discord there. You'll see links in all of our articles. And come talk to us. We like talking to you guys. Have a good night, and see you all later.
Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, whatever you celebrate, and enjoy the long weekend. Good luck in your fantasy playoffs as well. And we'll see you next week at Wednesday. Is that?
I believe we're going to do Wednesday next week.
Wednesday next week.
Family plans. So
come in a little early for your championship game matchups.
Peace. See ya.